All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to episode 7 of Ferg's Footy Fanfare AFL spoken properly with myself, Ned Fergus. Joining me alongside me, as always, I've got Jay Fergus. Jay, how are you going, mate?
Beautiful Mr. Ned Fergus. I'm great. My team had a scrappy win, but 4 points is 4 points. And you must be feeling pretty good as well, mate.
Yeah, mate. How good's Monday Night Football? I'm loving it. I'm loving
Ah,
football nearly every night of the week. It is
it's so good.
fantastic.
And I cannot wait for this new fixture to start as well. It's 20 days of straight football. It's heaven. It's where it's
It's
at.
going to be awesome. It's going to be sick.
And I reckon we're going to, bank accounts are going to be looking a bit dodgy with a couple of ridiculous multis out. We'll shout out to our cousin Mark Costa on that one.
Yeah, I'm not really a betting man, Jay, but yeah, Mark, hope you go better this week, unlike last week.
Look,
Very
to be honest,
unfortunate.
given our current tipping record, it's probably a smart thing that we're not betting, man, or else we'd be fucking in debt.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's just dive in. So, obviously, our last episode, we sort of got caught up in the middle of round 7. So I think we were broadcasting midway through the Brisbane and GWS game. So, let's get your takes on that game for a starter, Jay. What was your thoughts out of that?
It was quite a good game, I thought. I think that it was really one inside a 20-minute patch where Brisbane just showed their class. And then it pretty much stayed to that 3-4 goal margin throughout the game. I think so. That's twice Brisbane's been able to do that. They did it against Port Adelaide in that second quarter against them, and they did it against GWS last week. So I think that's just showing they're starting to become more potent. And when they really take teams for a ride, they put the pedal down to the metal and make sure they get the job done.
Yeah, I think this game really probably solidified them as premiership favourites at the moment. I thought they were very impressive. But a question I've got for you is, where does this lift come from the Giants? I mean, they made a grand final last year. They made a semi-final the year before, and a couple of preliminary finals. So it's all there realistically, but they need a lift because they are definitely a top 4 worthy side. Where does
It is,
where does
and
it
I
come
guess
from?
I guess it's the $1 million question. And I think there's a lot of teams that currently fall into this category that when their plan A doesn't work, they really struggle to find a plan B. Um, I found in the media throughout the week, Brett Deledio, a former GWS player, said that when the going gets tough, they don't really turn to teamwork. They all focus on their individual attributes, which is a problem that you'd have to face with so much talent in one squad. These kids have been brought up through all the ranks, being the best in their team and the best in their leagues. So I really think that they need to try and focus on that camaraderie, really work as a team to get through slumps and manage, instead of getting 3 or 4 goals down, just 1 or 2 and just scrapping and hanging on.
I think that's what's been, a real successful trait from Geelong. You go back to Geelong in their dominant years, Hawthorn in their dominant years. You're probably seeing it now from Richmond and even Collingwood. Like Collingwood still are able to find a way to win.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is what it's we've only just played round 7. Still got quite a while in the season to go, so they do need to work on it, but it's not dire straits just yet. They're showing they got the quality, but you can't really afford to be going through rough patches in this season with only 17 games being played.
Yeah, 100%. So the next game we went to after that was Gold Coast and Sydney. So my taking out of that was Gold Coast did what they had to do. Like, I think a lot of us would have expected Gold Coast to win, going on their recent form. And Sydney, they were better than the previous week, but you can really see they're lacking depth in the personnel to really challenge a decent side, from my opinion.
Yeah, Sydney is at this current stage the worst that they're going to be this season. They're missing their 2 of their best 3 players. So that impacts Papley's ability to get the ball and kick goals. And I know they had Callum Sinclair back, and this is something that I particularly harp on, but they just don't have the height and depth in their squad. In saying that, Gold Coast are starting to look, really competitive each week. They don't seem to be easy beats. They've had their 4th rising star in 7 rounds with Noah Anderson. So that's the quickest team to get 4 Rising Stars. A previous record was GWS. It took up until round 12 to get 4 Rising Stars. So fun fact of this podcast.
That's good. So with your taking on Papley, about him playing forward, does he have to get up the ground, play a bit more midfield minutes, do you reckon? Because he's probably one of their best ball users. Do they need him around the ball to at least give him some sort of forward entry and somewhat chance of scoring?
Personally, I'd go against that unless they're getting absolutely poleaxed. The ball's not even coming forward. Then you need to have your best players on the ball. But he's at his best when he's playing in the forward line. I think you got to keep him there for the moment. And I guess the positive aspect of when teams are struggling and inexperienced is that you get the young kids through. So you got Rowbottom, you've got a few other youngsters, Haywood and stuff like that, are starting to get some regular game time. And I think they've got about 5 or 6 of their midfielders that are currently under 22 years old. So there are plus sides, but at the moment it's, teething issues.
Just one question that I've got for you as well about Sydney. And I thought about this during the game. Luke Parker, he seems to have dropped off the face of the earth.
Yeah, he really does.
He was looking a red-hot chance for a Norm Smith medal. You go back 2016 grand final. He was the real deal.
And even in his first couple of seasons, he was all the hype. And, yeah.
Yeah, it just hasn't done much in the last couple of years. And, a few years ago, he was the real danger man for Sydney, almost overtaking Kennedy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether Longmire does expect a little bit more out of him. I guess these are things that we can only speculate on. But I think if you're a Sydney supporter, you'd want a bit more out of him. I guess as long as he's showing enough commitment and vigour towards his teammates and the collective result.
Yeah, he's got to be the main man. But we'll move on to the next game, which was Richmond, North Melbourne. So my taking from that was Richmond really did display their youth well. I thought Bolton and Egg Smith really played well. And even Pickett started the year off quite slowly. And he seemed to have a fair bit of an impact. I thought he played the real Trent Cotchin sort of role, laying tackles, going in and winning the ball, getting to the ball first. But my take from North Melbourne was, a real scoring issue. And, they went 3 quarters without a goal. And where does this lead to Ben Brown? Ben Brown, although he did have 3 shots on goal, probably all of them I thought he should have kicked. So he probably realistically should have had 3 goals. But he, just don't know what's going on with him.
I think this game perfectly solidified, Richmond playing their best footy given the personnel that they have at the moment and North Melbourne playing their worst. They're in real big trouble at the moment, North Melbourne. I guess it's tough when you're a full forward in a struggling team to firstly get opportunities, but then you need to make the most of those opportunities. So I think all this media criticism that Ben Brown is receiving, I think it's a little bit unfair considering the way that the ball's coming in and the game style that North Melbourne's playing. They're far too slow, far too down the line. They don't have anyone breaking through and stuff like that, and that's what they expect from their Simpkin, Zerha, Mason Wood. They expect them to work up, and they're not doing that at the moment.
Yeah.
What do you think will happen with this Ben Brown situation in terms of the speculation that North Melbourne is shopping around? Do you think there's a couple of clubs that would really require his services? And do you think they'd be willing to give up a lot for him?
So from what I believe, Ben Brown's asking $750,000 a season.
Okay.
The rate he's playing at the moment, he doesn't play like that. But like you were saying, yes, the supply isn't meeting the demand for Ben Brown at the moment. I think they had 1 inside 50 in the first quarter, so you can't do much when it's not going down there. But yeah, I saw a thing about trade for possibly, I think it was Matt Crouch.
I did see that scenario as well, although pick 2 for Ben Brown seems pretty full on.
Yeah, I think especially
I think that's overs.
Yeah, I think especially in where Adelaide's looking. I think Adelaide are going to go for youth as well. Yeah, I don't know. From off the top of my head, I don't know what teams really need a good key forward. Essendon losing, if they are to lose Joe Danaher, maybe Ben Brown might be a good solution because, with all the injury troubles and all that, and they've got I'd say on his day, Ben Brown is quite a reliable key forward. He'll They're
Oh,
giving you 2 or
yeah.
3 goals a game, and that's all you can ask for, really, out of a key forward. If they're kicking a couple of goals, it's what they're there for. It's what they're paid the money for. So,
Yeah. I think and I might upset a couple of listeners, Aiden Sheedy in particular, but I think he'd be a good suit down at Melbourne. Um, I think that they're looking for a key forward, but then the main issue with that would be the ball in. You know, he's very, very good on the lead. We know that the Melbourne midfield, when they do struggle, they struggle because they can't hit their forwards on the lead. So that could also be somewhere else I can see Ben Brown ending up at the end. But I know they've got Wiedemann coming through as well. So
does that mean Ben Brown probably needs to work on his contest game a bit? Hitting packs a bit harder.
Potentially, but he's so strong on the lead and marking out front that if he's able to get to a team that works to his strengths by moving the ball quickly and allowing him to run into space, then that would be the case. But North Melbourne aren't doing that at the moment. They're really, really struggling.
But I think most key forwards, would like it just right out in front of you on the lead. Like it's a bit hard to cop that sort of service. So the next game was, probably the match of the round. And a lot of people said that. I didn't really buy into it, but that really was match of the round. So my taking out of it was Carlton were honourable in defeat. It was probably one that really got away from them and could prove costly. And Port, well, I didn't think they were all that impressive, but at the end of the day, a win's a win. And, I mean, when you're sitting up the northern end of the ladder, you just need to take whatever you can.
Well, that's right. And, let's be real. Port Adelaide nearly squandered that. They dominated for the last 7 minutes of the game. They had 3 shots, all within 30 meters, all on relatively easy angles. And then Robbie Gray coming in clutch, as soon as he marked that, I was watching that. I'm like, that's going middle straight through. And it did as well. He's pretty good on the clutch. He's probably my second most reliable shot for goal. I'd have Michael Walters first.
Brings back a few memories, doesn't it, to the St Kilda faithful?
Yes, it does. We'll have to just keep that in mind for this week, and we'll have to bring up some Richmond replays of some heartbreaking defeats if you're going to keep that one up, Ned.
Yeah, good one, Jay. All right, so that's all we have out of that game. So the next game was Melbourne and Hawthorn. I thought this game was going to be really interesting. I think Hawthorn's best is absolutely spectacular. But really, I thought Melbourne really brought back that 2018 sort of game style back. Like, Hawthorn couldn't lay a hand on them.
I 100% agree. When they're in the mood to play some good footy, they play some really good footy, Melbourne.
They are a very attractive team to watch.
Yeah, I don't think there would have been a lot of teams that would have beaten them the way they played on Sunday. And I guess that all stems from they've got a few people starting to progress and develop. And the obvious one is Christian Petrarca. He's really starting to step out of his shell. I'm not living up to the calls made by some media personalities that he is at the moment as good or better than Dusty. It's a bit of a long stretch, but he's definitely going the right way. And, it has taken a little while for him to develop into the footballer a lot of people believed he would be. But it's good to see that he's starting to become a consistent and pretty, bit of a bull for them in the midfield and forward line.
Like what I said on Facebook on a comment, I'm sure Dustin Martin is very concerned sitting there with a Brownlow medal, 2 Norm Smiths and 2 premierships. I'm sure he's very concerned. But like we touched on this last week about Hawthorn, about a rebuild. And obviously Clarko's future has really dived in. So I think Clarko is contracted for another 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years.
So do we potentially see a takeover in 2 years?
It's interesting, I guess it's all going to rely on performance, whether they try and test something that was done like with Essendon, with the Worsfold Rutten switch over, or, whether they're able to do some magic in the next 2 years and really start contending again. I'm not too sure how that will go. I think their list isn't there. I don't really think that any other coach would be able to do much more than what they've got. I think their list is far too inconsistent. I don't think their midfield's up to it. I think that's their biggest concern. And now I think Mitchell Lewis got injured on the weekend and Patton's out. So now they're really struggling for some tall timber up forward.
Well, see, just to back up Hawthorn's list, and yeah, I don't think they're an absolute awesome list. But you got Mitchell, who's a Brownlow medalist. You got Jager O'Meara, who's considered an A-grader. You've got Sicily, who's probably really an A-grade defender. Stratton holds his role pretty well. You got Warple, who's coming through as a nice young defender. Scully's been pretty solid, I'd say, over the last few years.
Yeah, he has been a good
and also you got Chad Wingard, who's a dual All-Australian. And you got Puopolo, multiple premiership player. You got McAvoy, multiple premiership player. Burgoyne, he's just silky. Those players probably getting towards the end of the year, so you could probably cut them a bit of slack. But it's not an awful list. Like, I think if you were going to line up that list against Gold Coast, you'd probably think that list would be a lot better, but they're just not performing.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point because their best football is really good, you know. Definitely top 8 football at their best. So, yeah, there is a real issue getting the best out of them at the moment. And I think that stems from the midfield at this stage. They were absolutely swamped by Melbourne on this weekend. And when they tend to lose heavily, that's where it comes from.
Yeah, so moving on, we went to the Western Derby or the Western Derby, whatever you want to call it. I summed this game up pretty easily. I thought Freo, they held their own pretty well throughout it, but in the end, I just said Freo outclassed West Coast was too good. I think that's what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, in the first quarter, Fremantle were really competitive. You know, they looked like they wanted to take it to them, and they probably should have been up on the scoreboard. But then we saw, I think, in the last 2 minutes of that first quarter, West Coast went down there, you know, a couple of times, a couple of goals. And that's all it takes when you've got a team like West Coast. And now that they're starting to get that confidence back, you know, they're going to start facing some really tough opposition, and they're going to be up to it now. I think they've got a tough game next week. Yeah, Collingwood. So that's going to end up becoming a really good game.
Yep. All right. So wasn't much to analyse out of that. I think that was pretty well summed up. So we went to Monday night's game, Adelaide and St Kilda. So I said, yeah, Adelaide are probably better than previous performances, but how much better were they? And St Kilda, well, they really just beat the Blues last week. You know, they were really challenged towards, you know, the start of that last quarter and the middle phase of that last quarter, and they were able to come out on top, which I thought was a very good response. I mean, we saw against Fremantle, they got dominated, you know, for 3 quarters. Absolutely. But once they got dominated, they were sort of able to peg it back a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Like Adelaide in stages of that played really well. The main concern that I had with Adelaide in that aspect is that although they seem to be dominating around and their cleanliness inside and able to get it to the outside, they really struggle going forward. I know that in the media, the talking of the umpiring has been somewhat contentious. And this fact that Adelaide scored 6 of their 8 goals through free kicks 4 isn't so much of a criticism of the umpiring, but it really does outline how Adelaide struggled to move the ball freely enough to score in open play.
Yeah, I don't see, no offence to Brett Ratton, but I don't see what you really get out of quizzing the umpires. Like, what are they going to say? Yeah, we made a mistake. Oh, yeah, we got it right. Like, it's not going to change any outcome of the game. So, but you're better off just shrugging your shoulders, getting on with it.
Well, that's right. And considering the way the game panned out, St Kilda really struggled offensively at times, but I think that was due to a really good setup from Adelaide. I thought they battled really well. But, you know, that's what you expect out of teams that are around the lower end of the table. And I think this was just an example of they just played a team with better quality and, you know, a bit more power going forward. Like Adelaide had more inside 50s than St Kilda, which is big. So in saying that, St Kilda had a few good players standing out, like Jack Steele, who's he's really starting to solidify himself as a really, you know, capable inside midfielder. He's currently second in the AFL coaches votes behind Lachie Neale. And they had some good standouts in the back line as well, which is good because they were under a lot of pressure for a fair amount of the game.
Yeah, he's really becoming something else, Jack Steele. So from there, we'll move on to the next round, round 8. So first game we've got going on there, Bulldogs and Gold Coast. So for mine, Bulldogs just need to back themselves up. And I really think for the Gold Coast, if they really want to solidify being a finals contender, this is a must-win game for me. They've really got to just stamp their authority on someone, like a quality opposition like the Bulldogs. So the Bulldogs on their day are a very good side, and we saw that last week. I think they really need to just make a big stamp, and this would be a perfect game to do it, I reckon.
That's right. I mean, Gold Coast have previously been very competitive for about 3/4 against Geelong, who it's pretty safe to say they'll be up there around the end of the season. Home game, though, both on the same amount of wins. Like, this is their opportunity to show the AFL world that they're just not there to make numbers and they are actually vying for a top 8 spot. In saying that, I'm going to tip the Western Bulldogs. I think they've got the better potential to play well. Their best, I think, will beat Gold Coast best. Although it will be interesting to see. Lockie Hunter has been named as an out due to personal reasons. He's a very important player for them. He offers a lot. He offers a clean kick, a good disposal efficiency. It'll be interesting. I'm actually really looking forward to this game. This could almost be one of the games of the round, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought to go out with Lockie and his family, whatever he's battling.
Yeah,
but I agree with you. I'm going to go with the Western Bulldogs as well. I think their best probably outshines the Gold Coast best. So the next game we have will be the grand final rematch, GWS and Richmond. For me personally, Richmond have got a lot of outs. I think if you were to, this is a game they can probably afford to drop. Realistically, I'll say that. But GWS they've been struggling the last few weeks. They really need to get their ass into gear and really win this game. I think if they drop this one, especially to a very undermanned Richmond, where's forward from here? I think this is a real must-win game for the Giants.
Yeah, well, Richmond has been playing, the last 2 weeks, they were quelled pretty well by Sydney, who played very defensively. We saw that, and it was tough conditions. I thought the way that they played last Saturday was excellent, It was good to watch that from an impartial view and watch them play. That is the brand of football that we expect from Richmond. So it'll just be interesting to see whether GWS fall into that style of football that allows Richmond to do that. And I think, something that we haven't mentioned yet is that, the last time these guys played was a grand final that Richmond won by 80+ points. I think that's going to, not only is it going to motivate the Richmond players, I think they could have a couple of scarring issues on the GWS players to rock up on grand final day and lose by that much. It's going to leave a few scars. So I'm going to tip Richmond. I think that they're capable of winning. I think that they're playing better football. And I don't really have enough faith in GWS to perform week in, week out.
Yeah, I'm going to tip the Giants. But just one thing, and I was thinking about this during Saturday's game. The system, like having a good system, does that help a team that maybe does not have the personnel to be a better side? So if you have a really good system, but say not a really great side, can that really help pull you back into being a really good side?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess it also involves everyone being on board with it as well. If you have everyone doing the specific role that they need to do, like Richmond struggled at the start. They didn't have all the pressure there that they have, for the past 3 years. And sure, I know that in the Richmond St Kilda game, all that they were missing was a bit of polish, disposal efficiency and 100%. Stuff like that. But when you get, people like Ross, Graham, who's been in and out of the side this year, Egg-Malesi Smith, once you get these boys into the system, you get them playing that brand of football, they're able to adopt to it pretty quickly. But it all starts with having a good game plan. Richmond have a good game plan. GWS just too inconsistent for me at the moment.
Yeah, so the next game we dive into will be Carlton and North Melbourne. So for me, out of this one, so North will be coming up against, without being biased, probably a weaker opposition than last week. They just need some respect. Like, they need to come out and just, regardless win, lose or draw, they just need to be somewhere within the game to at least earn a bit of respect. Mm-hmm. And for me, Carlton, if they're going to push for top 8, this is a game they just have to win.
Yeah, this is a must-win for Carlton if that's the case. Um, Teams aren't out just yet, so it's hard to say. But my personal opinion is no Cunnington, no win for North Melbourne. I don't know how he's so important to them, but he just is. It must be the kind of pressure that he provides, just the shadow of a man that he is. You know, it really brings the North Melbourne team together by the looks of it. If he's not there, they won't win. But even if he is there, I think Carlton's going to, they're playing some pretty good football at the moment. They looked half decent against Port Adelaide. They took it to the very last second. So, I think they need to make sure they bring that intensity. They need to win if they're going to show teams their top 8.
Yep. So the next game we move to a sort of modern day rivalry.
Yeah.
Sydney and Hawthorn, a couple of grand finals battled out over the last few years. And I can't believe that we're sitting here saying, what? They played the last grand final in 2014. They're sitting 14th and 16th on the ladder.
That's right. It's almost the decline of 2 eras here, isn't it? So,
well, both teams, it's a real. Like I said for Sydney, that it's a real potential win. Like if Hawthorn have played like that the last few weeks, I think give Sydney every chance, especially the way they played last week. They were very impressive. But Hawthorn, like if they're going to make anything out of this year, they've just got to win this game.
Yeah. You've just summed it up perfectly, Ned. They really need to start getting on track. They need increase their efficiency. They need to be harder at the ball. And it is a little bit weird seeing these two teams at the bottom of the table, vying it out. And if I just switch to the ladder, I think they're both, well, I know Sydney is. They both are. They're already both a game away from the 8. Sydney 2 games. They're in 14th versus 16th.
Yeah.
On at 78%. So it shows that when they're losing big. I'm going to tip Hawthorn only because I've got that faith that, like you said, in those players that you named before, when they're on, they are difficult to beat. And against a slightly more inexperienced and younger Sydney team, I think that they'll probably be enough to get them over the line.
Yeah, I've got Hawthorn in this one. So from the previous game, North and Carlton, I presume you're taking Carlton?
Yeah, correct. I will be taking Carlton.
Yep. So then we move on to Port Adelaide and St Kilda. So for me, Port Adelaide has got to keep on keeping on. Probably just being a bit more efficient on the scoreboard. And St Kilda, I said, this is a massive scalp game. If they can get this, they take a real big scalp, and this can be like a big build towards potentially a finals campaign for St Kilda.
Well, that's right. St Kilda needs a scalp now. They've lost 2 games that they should have won in North Melbourne and Fremantle. They did beat Richmond, and you could argue that them beating Western...
They won a lot of respect out of that. I think they won a lot of respect out of that game.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, after that Freo loss, they really need to make up with it. Like if you're just jostling through the fixture at the moment, you'd probably say you wouldn't probably put your money on St Kilda, but to make up for that loss to Fremantle, if they can win this, then that sort of just draws it even.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's imperative Port Adelaide to win. They really need to stop the run because, as far as I can see watching it, St Kilda doesn't have much of a plan B at the moment. In saying that, I think that if St Kilda do manage to, short passes through the corridor, that seems to be Port Adelaide's weakness at the moment. They seem to be struggling down back in terms of height. So potentially it's a game for Max King to really step out and, kick a couple, take a few big marks. But I think it's all going to come down to how quickly people move the ball and how quickly Port Adelaide allows St Kilda to move the ball. I'm going to tip St Kilda. I've got a feeling about this one, Ned.
Yeah, I don't blame you because I think Port Adelaide weren't anything special last week. I don't think St Kilda bring their best like I've seen them against Richmond and, in patches in previous games. I think they're very more than well capable of winning this game. So to go on to the next game, we've got the absolutely struggling Crows coming up against Essendon, who were, everyone had them in their premiership race last week before.
Yeah, they were really disappointing last week. I know that we spoke about it previous podcast, but they were really disappointing, which leads to a question that I want to ask you. How important do you think that Jake Stringer is to that Essendon team?
I think he's very important. I reckon he provides that real sort of X factor to their side, sort of like like a Dusty Martin does for Richmond, or like a De Goey does for Collingwood. Like
Yeah,
he,
I
he
think
can he can
yeah.
be the man that can win you a game off his boot.
Yeah, I would liken him in terms of his influence for his team as to, as to the Martin De Goey type. I wouldn't say he's there based on his pure talent and his skill, his like overall rating, if you'd like to call it that. But I think that he's so important. So having him out is big at the moment. I think it's bigger than Danaher being out, obviously.
Yeah. So for Adelaide, when does the first win come? Does it come this week or does it not? And Essendon really need to redeem themselves. They were absolutely terrible. Was it last Friday? Last Friday.
Yeah. Yep. Against the
Yeah.
Doggies.
So can you see Adelaide popping up their first win in this game? It is at the Adelaide Oval.
Yeah. Look, to be completely honest, I don't see them winning this, and I'm not too sure what Adelaide's next block of fixtures look like. But if I were them, I'd be wanting to play North Melbourne as quickly as I could because I think that's the only team that they look like they could beat at the moment.
All right. So I'll give you Adelaide's next. So actually next week, next round, they do have North Melbourne
Oh, really?
on the
There we go.
on the Gold Coast, and they have Melbourne in Adelaide, and then they will play Collingwood in Adelaide, and then after that they play the Bulldogs at Metricon.
Yeah. See, I don't think they'll win this week. I think that I think their best chance is going to be against North Melbourne. I don't really see too many teams that aren't playing as well. They've already played Sydney and lost to them, although it was only by 3 points, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't much in it.
But no, Essendon, they're a really difficult team to gauge, Essendon, because their midfield's
Their
good
best
and
is
up to
very
it.
good.
Shield's
Their
still out
best
as
is
well,
very good.
isn't he?
Yeah, Shield is out, and I think that is maybe why on the betting market. Not that I'm a betting man, but Adelaide is sitting on outsiders at $2.62.
Yeah, it's not huge, is it?
No, it's not that much in
Jeez.
it.
It might actually be a
Essendon
closer game than I first
$1.47.
anticipated, Ned.
Well, if Adelaide can play like what they did against St Kilda in those few patches they played really well, I mean, there's every chance that they can really win that game.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Just whether Essendon's going to bring it. I'm still going to go Essendon, but I'm a little more
Same.
stressed about that tip now that we've spoken about it in depth.
So the next game, probably for me, will be match of the round. West Coast hosting Collingwood at Optus. West Coast, they've really started to hit their mojo a bit in the last few weeks. They've probably played against weaker opposition, but for me at the moment, Collingwood are probably still the benchmark side. I know Collingwood have a few outs in side bottom and Howe, but if West Coast are really going to, if they think that they're going to somehow redeem themselves from last year, they have to win this game as well. But yeah. I'm backing in Collingwood for this one.
Yeah, I'm going to back in Collingwood also, although there is a bit of a concern. They scored. I thought they played very well against Geelong last week. Thought they were the cleaner team.
They made it look very clean. It went in slippery conditions.
They did. They kicked 8 goals and De Goey kicked 5 of them. He's out this week. I don't know if you've heard anything, but potentially Cox comes in. It's a Sunday afternoon game. I presume, it being in Perth, that it's going to be good weather. Look, I'm going to tip Collingwood, but as is always the issue with them, I think they really need someone to stand up and make sure they kick goals. Like Myercheck's a good barometer for him. When he's on, the team is generally on.
Yeah. It's a hard one to pick, this one. So next game we roll into Melbourne and Brisbane. So for me, this is a real scalp game for Melbourne, and especially if they played like they did last week. I reckon they'll take it right up to Brisbane.
This is going to be a really good game, I think. Yeah.
And Brisbane, they're premiership favourites, but they can't really choke. We've seen what Brisbane have been capable of over the last, this season and last season. But they've really struggled against quality opposition, I felt like. I reckon last year they really reaped a good draw. But now, when they're coming up against quality opposition, they just can't be going butchering these games, especially, with their dominant home ground advantage of the Gabba. they really need home finals, I think, if they're ever going to do any damage this season.
Yeah. I guess in line with that, when you start talking about rocking up to big games and beating big opposition, that's when you start to talk about their younger players like McCluggage, Berry, even Cam Rayner and stuff like that. Like, this is where they have to start, showing themselves as players that can perform week in, week out against the best opposition. Well, in saying that, that's based on games that maybe play as good as they did last week, which they are capable of, but I'm not too sure that's going to happen. I'm going to tip Brisbane. That's my tip for this game.
Yeah, I think Brisbane, I feel a lot more safer tipping Brisbane this week. So that leads us on to the last game, which will be on Monday. Our good Monday Night Football.
Ooh,
so we'll have Fremantle hosting Geelong at Optus. So for me in this one, I mean, Freo have been thereabouts competitive-wise. And we did go on the stat about Geelong have not won a game at Optus Stadium. So I think for mine, Fremantle just need to expose Geelong's Optus Stadium form. They beat them last year up there, and Geelong were really the benchmark throughout the whole home and away season. But who says they can't do it again?
Yeah, I remember that game that they played last year, and something that Fremantle were really, really good at was stoppage football that day. They didn't allow any run from Dangerfield or Selwood, all of those superstars. Although Selwood is out as well this week with a hamstring injury. In saying that, and although Fremantle has been very competitive, I'm still going to have to tip Geelong.
Gary Ablett out as well. I don't know how
that's
much
right.
To play on it.
Yeah, but hopefully everything's going well with his family as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Geelong need to break this drought, and
they really do. Yeah, it's going to end up like St Kilda at Adelaide Oval.
I've gone with Geelong.
Yep.
As the safer tip, but Fremantle could do some damage. So that pretty much sums up what we've been, what there is to talk about previous round, this round coming up. We got anything more to add?
No, there is one question that I want to ask you, and it's just based, if you had to, I want your tip for the Coleman, given the stage we're at in the season. I want your tip for the Brownlow.
All right, I think the Brownlow is I think that's a very easy pick at the moment. I think everyone's going to say Lachie Neale.
Yeah, it is a bit hard to go past him at the moment. He's just head and shoulders above the competition.
Yeah, and
most disposals, most contested disposals.
Coleman, just looking at the goals, if Port keep their form going throughout the whole year, Charlie Dixon could get it. But I'm really liking the look of Jeremy Cameron. I think Jeremy Cameron's a very hard man to stop, and he's only a couple of goals behind. Yeah. Charlie Cameron, he's up there, but I feel, and he's been quite easily isolated a few times. And that's my real thing with Brisbane is if you isolate Cameron, I don't think Hipwood delivers as much for Brisbane. I think Cameron gives more to Brisbane than what Hipwood does. So if you can isolate Charlie Cameron, I reckon he's their number one forward. You're not going to see much out of Brisbane. So I think Jeremy Cameron could go back-to-back on the Coleman.
Yeah, right.
Yourself?
I'm going to go Charlie Dixon, just based on the fact that, Port Adelaide seem like they're playing some very good football this year. I think he kicked 3 goals 4 on Sunday afternoon.
I think he did.
He had a pretty inaccurate day at the office. And look, I think this year, with the way that the competition's going out and the way that scoring is happening, I think if you manage to have, 3 games in a season where you kick 6 or 7 goals, I think that's almost enough in itself if you kick 1 or 2 for the rest of the season. Yeah. So I think he's most capable. I think, with GWS, they've got Cameron as their main man, and rightly so, but you've also got Himmelberg and Finlayson who are capable of having good games every now and then.
Yeah, so that pretty much sums up everything for this 7th episode. Just a final shout-out. I just want to do a massive shout-out to the Tuck family. Rest in peace, Shane Tuck. He was a very likeable character, especially when I was growing up watching Richmond through their dark ages. So all the best for the Tuck family. And Jay, it was wicked talking to you.
As always,
do it again next week.
Beautiful, mate. We'll catch up soon. See ya.